Welcome to a series of grammar lectures on Biblical Hebrew. Today we'll be looking at imperatives and nouns. First, we'll look at the four forms of the imperative, then singular nouns, and then three things related to nouns: the article, object marker, and conjunction vav. First, the imperative. After we look at a couple grammatical terms. First grammatical term is person. Person can be divided into three categories. Each category describes a different participant in a conversation. Person can apply to pronouns and verbs. So as a concrete example, I have English pronouns listed. First person corresponds to English I or we. Second person corresponds to you. Third person corresponds to he, she, or they. So each of these pronouns describes that different participant in the conversation. First person describes the one speaking. Second person describes the one spoken to. Third person describes the one spoken about. Or we could say each of these participants has a different referent. First person refers to the one who is speaking. Second person refers to the addressee. Third person refers to anyone else. The other term is inflection. Inflection can be described as a word changing form based on its function or referent. So this is the distinction between a word and the forms that a word can take. So you have chair versus chairs. This is one word, two forms. The default form is the singular chair, which inflects by adding an S at the end, and then it has a plural referent, chairs. You can put these two together and talk about Hebrew imperatives. Hebrew imperatives always occur in the second person, so they're direct commands. You point at someone and you tell them what to do, and they inflect for two things. Gender can be masculine or feminine, and they inflect for number, singular or plural, based on who you're speaking to. So the default form is the masculine singular. You use that when you command a guy to do something. Here is the word for get up. So you would command one guy, kum. When it inflects, it adds something on at the end. And when you command a girl, you say kumi, lots of guys, kumu, lots of girls, komna. And notice when the base form inflects, the base for the most part stays the same in the different inflected forms. You pronounce the first syllable kum, except for this final form, komna. The base form changes. This isn't a lecture about how to predict how the base form will change. Merely to note at this point that, yes, when Hebrew words inflect, the base can change. Sometimes it's pretty minimal. Sometimes a change can be quite drastic. And so the trick is always to recognize a Hebrew word when you hear or see the inflected form. But whereas the base may change, the ending for the imperatives is totally predictable. So you can tell what the referent of the imperative is by looking at the ending. We see the masculine singular endings. Well, here there is no ending, so what the default form of the imperative, that's the masculine singular. But when it inflects, it's 100% predictable. All feminine singular imperatives end in E. All masculine plural imperatives end in U. And all feminine plural imperatives end in Na. There are no exceptions. So when you see an imperative, you can know what the referent is by looking at what's at the end. And you'll be right 100% of the time with this chart. Next, let's look at singular nouns. Hebrew nouns, like English, inflect for number. You can have a singular noun or a plural noun. Unlike English, Hebrew nouns have inherent gender. each noun is either a masculine noun or a feminine noun, which means if you have a masculine noun that is a subject of a verb, you would use a masculine verb to agree with it. Or if you describe the noun with an adjective, you would use a masculine adjective, not a feminine adjective. So it can be important to recognize whether a noun is masculine or feminine. And here, like we did with the imperatives, you'd look at the ending. And like the imperatives, the masculine singular nouns don't have a particular ending. You have ish, man, kiseh, chair, basar, meat. All of these are masculine singular nouns, and there's nothing special about how they end. With feminine nouns, for the most part, there is something special. So if a noun doesn't look feminine, you can assume that it's masculine. A majority of feminine nouns end with kametz he. You have isha, woman, para, cow, and Torah, law. And some feminine nouns end in tav, malchut, kingdom, and chatat, sin. I said if a noun doesn't look overtly feminine, assume that it's masculine. Well, this assumption will sometimes get you in trouble because there are several feminine nouns that don't look feminine in the singular. Cherev means sword, and Evan means stone. They don't look particularly feminine, but they are. In fact, many of the most common nouns are irregular. As far as these irregular nouns go, I don't require you to memorize the gender. At this point, I want you to recognize that Hebrew nouns have gender. There are some guidelines for how to predict the gender, but with many nouns, they're unpredictable. The unpredictable ones will always be noted as such on the flashcards. There will be a parenthesis and then a symbol inside that'll indicate whether it's masculine or feminine, when the form itself would indicate something other. The article. Let's begin with a couple definitions. We say that a noun is definite if we're referring to a particular object, and an indefinite noun refers to one of many such objects. English articles correspond. The definite article is the indefinite article is a or an. We can see this in a couple examples. Please pass the butter, or hand me a napkin. Hebrew is a little bit easier because it just has one article, the definite article, pronounced ha. If the noun doesn't have the article, then it's considered indefinite. Now, the article is always pronounced ha, and it's written as a prefix to the following word. Let's look at this. The default way to write this is with a patach and then writing a dagesh in the following root letter. The dagesh is a dagesh chazak, the doubling dagesh, because there's a preceding vowel. So here we have an indefinite noun, lechem, bread, and definite ha lechem, the bread. Sus, a horse, ha sus, the horse. Now, there's some variation with how the Masoretic scribes wrote the article, but there's no variation in how the article is pronounced. It's always pronounced ha. This is just to introduce you to, hey, it could be written slightly differently. And the difference in the article is caused by 5 letters that do not take a dagesh chazak. So the gutturals, aleph, ayin, hey, and chet, and resh were sounds that could not be doubled. So it wouldn't take the dagesh. And then the previous vowel for 3 of these letters would always compensate by lengthening. So a patach would be lengthened to a kametz. Here are some examples. Ish means man. Ha-ish means the man. Ir means city. Ha-ir means the city. Rosh means head. Ha-rosh means the head. But for two of these letters, it would reject the dagesh, but it wouldn't cause compensatory lengthening. This patach remains as a patach. Heichal means temple. Ha-heichal means the temple. Cherev means sword. Ha-cherev means the sword. So, yes, there's some variation with how the article was written by the Masoretic scribes, but in pronouncing it today with modern pronunciation, the article is always pronounced ha. Now let's look at the object marker. Et has no translational value, but it does serve a pretty important, pretty specific purpose. With this example sentence, you have a noun, kevis, and it's definite because it has the prefix preposition ha. And ha kevis as a definite noun is the direct object of this imperative sa, and so we stick in the object marker directly before the definite direct object. Sa et ha kevis. Number 2 shows that et precedes all definite direct objects, whether or not they have the article. So this is a proper name, David, David, and it's the direct object of the verb sa, and so you also get et. Sa et David. And in this way, Hebrew is just like English. You don't say the David, neither do you say ha David. Number 3 shows that et only marks definite direct objects. So you can have an indefinite direct object and you don't get et. So this asterisk marks an ungrammatical sentence. If you wanted to say pick up a sheep, you wouldn't say sa et kevis. What you would say is number 4, sa kevis. So if you have a noun and it's indefinite, lacking the article, it also lacks the direct object marker et. Number 5 shows you a slight variation in how the Masoretic scribes wrote this. You can see this, sa et hakevis. You can also see this, sa et hakevis. The difference here is this hyphen-looking thing. It's called a makef, and what it did was it served to join these two words as if they were one word. And so whenever that happens, you usually get vowel shortening. So here you have the long vowel tsere, but when it's joined to the following word, it shortens to a segol. It's not something to memorize, but it's something that I want you to be aware of, the slight variation in how it's written. It's pronounced the same, sa et hakevis, and it means the same. Number 5 shows you that et is only used when it marks the direct object of a verb. So number 6, Isha tachat ha-shulchan. Ha-shulchan is a definite noun, and it's an object, but it's not the direct object of a verb, it's the object of a preposition tachat. And so you don't get et. Et only marks a definite direct object of a verb. And finally, conjunction vav. Vav, the default form to write this as a conjunction is here, ve. It's written as a prefix to the following word, and it corresponds most closely in meaning to the English word and. So here, kisei ve shulchan means a chair and a table. It's written this way also before the article. So the horse and the cow, ha-sus ve ha-pagra. Notice here you have quite a bit going on with this word. You have the noun pagra, you have the prefix article ha, and the prefix conjunction ve. In what order do you get this? Well, always in this order, which is exactly like English. the horse and the cow. There's some slight variation in how the Masoretic scribes wrote the vowel. Instead of the default shva, it can be a patach before a noun that begins with a chatef patach. So what happens is the vav takes the corresponding short vowel. Kvasim va'anashim. The real variation occurs if the word begins with a beit, a mem, or a pei. Conjunction vav is no longer the consonant vav, but becomes a vowel letter, shurik. Lechem uvasar. And notice here, the word here is basar, and you're used to seeing it with a dagesh because it's a begad kafat letter, a dagesh call. And begad kafat letters always lose that dagesh call if they occur after a vowel. So because this is a vowel letter, shurik, the begad kafat letter lost its dagesh. Lechem uvasar. And finally, you can get a shurik before a shva. So here, anashim uchavasim. There are phonological reasons for why there's this variation, even the more drastic variation with the shurik here. But the important thing is that it's always written as a prefix, and when you're reading, you always see a vav, whether as a consonant or as a vowel letter, and it means basically and.